Welcome to the Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom for more than 10 years. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I began raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott from the Believe in Dog podcast. For more than 10 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned in case it could help you too. As the Alternative Dog Moms, Kimberly and I are bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and the brilliant people we're meeting along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
We have a guest today.
Finally. I figure people are getting tired of just us.
My schedule's been wonky for a while here, so we have some great ones coming up, and we're starting today. I'm really excited because I'm not a cat person, and I am excited to learn all things about cat raw feeding, and we have Sabrina Simmons here from Rawr Cat Food. So
Good
welcome,
job.
Sabrina.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to meet both of you.
Yes, you too. So we love a good origin story. So tell us, how did this all come about?
Well, in 2003, I adopted a kitten, Milton, and he was lovely, but very stinky, very gassy, very uncomfortable, rather unhappy little cat. So I took him to a lot of vets, a lot. I mean, he had acupuncture, he had herbs made for him. He tried all of the prescription diets, and I was at the end of my rope. So it was, back in the day. So I went onto Yahoo groups, as we did at one time, and I started looking for cat food alternatives, and there was a raw feeding group on there. So I hopped on there, did some research, and started making him food based on, recipes that existed at the time. And honest to God, he was a completely different cat within a week. He was just lively. He had good bowel movements, tons of energy, and just his overall demeanor really improved as well. Because I think he just really wasn't feeling good. And it came out, in many forms. So, I made him cat food for years, and I adopted another cat, and everything was nice and peachy keen. And then someone, and I don't know who to thank or scold for this, but someone at some point was like, "Oh, you should take this women's business class. They'll teach you how to, write a business plan, and you can start a business." And I thought, "Oh, that's brilliant." So I did. And now I'm here. My business plan looks nothing like my business at all. But it was a good try, very noble. So yeah, essentially I started, straight out of that business class, I got my very first customer, and she is still my customer.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So I started with her. I would deliver to her home, and she kind of spread the word. And so it was a lot of making food in my home, delivering it to clients, around the Bay Area. And it just naturally grew from there. We got a brick and mortar that had a little production space and a cute little tiny cat shop at the front. Then I joined up with Cat Town, which is a nonprofit cat rescue, and we ran the first cat cafe in the US. And that was good. That was really fun and weird. It's weird to tell people. Now it's gotten a lot more normal. But
Yeah.
imagine 2010 being like, "I make cat food." People were like, "What?"
Yep.
So, yeah, we grew and, upgraded our production spaces, and now here we are, still at it. So
Nice.
I got my first dog in 2004, and it was the first time I ever had a dog because I had a no pets really growing up kind of house. And, I just thought you fed like what you saw advertised on TV. I didn't know. And so was that the same for you with cat food? You're like, oh, you just go to the grocery store and buy whatever.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was a little bit, I had moved to San Francisco from Los Angeles, and So there was a lot of, it was like my introduction to woo. And so
Mm.
I was definitely leaning towards more natural, more holistic. But yeah, it was still kibble,
Yeah.
because when I grew up, we had dogs and the dogs lived outside and the dogs ate kibble and they were the dogs.
Yeah.
So it definitely took a little bit of, you know, understanding that these animals are, they're each their own individual species and they have their own needs. And it's just something that's taken people a long time to get back to that understanding.
Was there anything that stands out to you that you learned back then that was just like, oh, wow? Like for me, I did have a cat. He's since passed, but the big thing for me was the lack of moisture in kibble and how they needed more moisture. And it was just not something that I ever thought about or considered until I started looking into actually my dog's diet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think for me it all just kind of made made sense.
Mhm.
I don't remember what I was looking at, but there was a book I had back then that starts very simple, like, look at this animal. Just look at it. It has claws. Its eyes are at the front of its head. It has these sharp teeth. It's a wild animal essentially. And so just kind of getting an understanding of their physiology was really, you know, helpful to my journey here.
Yeah, I mean, everybody I know that has a cat ends up having a cat with kidney issues. And then when I started learning about the thing with the moisture and I'm like, "Oh, well, this is why everybody I know has, like, a cat on dialysis," you know?
Right. Yeah, and the difficulty with kidney issues is that, um, like big companies, big kibble companies kind of make it all about protein. Oh, well, there's too much protein in the diet. So all of their prescription diets are just very carbohydrate heavy, trying to kind of offset the protein to make their kidneys not have to go through that extra work. But the protein's not the issue. you know, you're right. It's them eating the wrong food for year after year after year. And it's a combination of that and a combination of people leaving kibble out all day. They're not cows. They don't need to graze in order to survive. They really need a nice solid meal and a big nap.
Yeah.
You know.
I think one of my favorite memories of Dr. Rob Silver, who is with Real Mushrooms, we were doing an acupuncture conference together in Seattle. And I expected all of the veterinarians there to be holistic because it was an acupuncture conference. I was wrong. And a woman came up to us to tell us about, she just kept returning because, we had been talking about raw feeding, and I think she was bound and determined to change my mind that weekend. And she made a point about how, a high protein diet is so dangerous. And she brought up cats. And it was so funny because he was doing something and he just turned to her and he was just like, that's wrong. There's like tons of science showing that that's wrong, that's how wrong it is. And she just had no response to it. And eventually they stepped off to the side and he educated her on this fact. But it was interesting to me that even people who maybe they're not technically a holistic veterinarian, but they're leaning towards that belief has been so instilled in the
Right.
veterinary community that someone who is looking at alternative modalities still believes that protein is dangerous. Like too much protein, I should say, is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of misconceptions in the cat world for sure. And I think, they're very different than dogs. Dogs are companions in a different way. You know,
Mhm.
3 of my own dogs, and it's like I can't go to the bathroom without the dogs in the bath. But the cat, like, right now, I have no idea where the cat is, but she
Yeah,
was here 10 minutes ago for dinner, so
yeah, exactly.
somewhere, right? Um, and it's not because, she is an independent creature, but they also do have needs. So there's this thing, especially when I had the cat cafe, people are obsessed with their cats. They love their cats, but they don't understand the right way to care for their cats.
Mhm.
And I think the difficulty lies in getting them to understand that. Yes, they're independent and they're not going to be all over you, but they still need a specific type of care. And, traditionally, we've just been taught go to the grocery store and get some cans or get
Yeah.
some, and you're good, you know? So it's
So
very interesting.
for people who are, because was my issue for years, I was able to transition my dogs to raw with no issue.
Right.
Whereas with my cat was just sort of like, yeah, I don't know what that is and I'm not eating it. And
Yeah.
it was so painful, especially because I made a point of going out and getting raw food that was for cats. So at least I got that. And it was not cheap. And because I buy in bulk, I didn't buy tons, but I did buy a lot.
Mhm.
And I ended up feeding it all to the dogs because the cat was just like, "Yeah, I'm not eating it." How do you recommend, like, for people who want to at least try to get their cat to give up the kibble?
Right. Well, I think the key component there is try. I think with cats, you have to determine that is what you're doing. Like,
Hmm.
we're a team. This is gonna be hard. There might be some tears, but we will get there. But I think if it's really difficult to have a cat try a new food and be successful right off the bat. So with kibble fed cats, the number one thing that people should do for their cat, even if they're kibble fed, is take that food away during the day. Cats do not need to graze. And their entire system, all of their organs are working if they can smell food. That's how they're programmed. So you're doing a great disservice to your cat if it can have its bowl out all day long. And that's why you see so many fat cats. People are like, oh, my cat barely eats. Well, it barely eats, but its body's working like it's eating all day long.
Wow.
So I always tell people if you can start by getting that food out of there and just have it out for half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, your cat will not only start to work on that schedule, but they'll just get more excited in general about food because now it's an event. It's not this stuff that's sitting out all day and, starting to get kind of funky. And then from there, you can start working in canned food and then raw food. But it really is a process. And I think the key is remembering that cats are imprint eaters. So from the very beginning of their lives, they're taught this is your food and everything else is not food and it's not safe. So that is why they're so cautionary. People are like, my cat's picky and stubborn. No, your cat's not picky and stubborn. Your cat is so smart that it's like, I don't know if this food is food. I don't want to get poisoned, so I'm not eating it. Um, and so it really is a long process sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. But generally I say if you can make that commitment, we can get you there. It's
Yeah.
a little bit of a hand-holding experience sometimes, but,
It took me a month or so to get my cat to start eating raw, and it didn't last long. Eventually we landed on freeze dried, and
yeah.
that was his jam. But, that was what I found is I was going too fast, and like
Mm,
what you said, I was just trying it and putting it out there, and my cat didn't know what it was. So I slowly transitioned from kibble to canned, and I would basically put a little kibble, a little can, and on a flat dish separating from each other. So, he started recognizing, "Oh, okay, so this is all food," and taking the kibble away and putting more canned in there, and then I did the same thing from canned to raw, and it took patience, and it's I think that before then, I just lacked the patience because I was treating my cat like I had treated my dogs. I can throw spaghetti in their dish and they will eat it. I mean, it's just they don't
absolutely.
care.
It is a test of patience and a test of being okay backtracking.
Mhm,
Sometimes
yeah,
some cats, the introduction of raw food, even to wet food, it's like the tiniest, tiniest amount. And then you do that for a couple days and mm, add a little more. But sometimes you hit a roadblock and they're like, whoa, that's too much. It's too fast. So now you have to go back a little, slow
yeah.
down. But it really is, at the end of the day, I think worth the trouble. The benefits that your cat is going to get from eating a raw food diet it's just uncomparable. There's nothing else to really compare it to. It's what naturally they need.
Yeah. I know one thing that I noticed is when you go to the pet store, and I think, everyone has noticed this, you know, 90% of the pet store is geared towards dogs with all the things that dogs need. Probably, 8% is for cats, and then the rest is for the other animals. And it feels like the cat stuff is kind of, it's back in a corner. No one at the pet store is really, especially if it's one of the big box pet stores, they barely know much about dogs, let alone about cats. Because I remember when I was trying to get my cat off of kibble, one of the salespeople at the store asked me, well, how are you going to keep your cat's teeth clean? And I was just like, oh, I need to go to a different store. Because at least at that time, I had learned that is a myth, that kibble does not clean the teeth. But they very much believe that. But how do you work in an industry that is so geared towards dogs? How do you get seen?
It's hard, honestly. It's really a matter of partnering with the right distributors, the right stores. Um, the stores that we have a tight relationship with and the ones generally who have that one, God bless them, cat person on the staff,
Mhm.
uh, they just do phenomenal, you know? They really do, but it is hard because there are stores that we've approached and it's like, "Well, we have a cat food." Well, okay, great.
A
You have
cat food.
yeah, you have 16 raw dog foods and a cat food. And, it's difficult because especially in an industry, there there's a lot of people in every industry who are basically looking at it from a financial standpoint. Is this gonna make me money? And if so, how much? And if the answer to that is not a whole ton, it's like, "Meh, we're good." So it's very hard because I think in the raw pet food industry, I I do feel there's a lot of respect from other pet food manufacturers. They're happy that I exist, but I am small still, and don't quite have that traction that dog food does. And it all comes down to education because, there's these like famous cat people that I'll see online and that many of them I know, and they're still feeding kibble. And it's like, all these things about cats, you know, you're in the industry in a different way than I am, but you are just so misinformed.
Mhm.
So, the question always comes back for me is how do I get the education out there and the desire to put the energy into getting your cat on the right food. And for a lot of our customers, especially the ones we got early on, they came to us because they were desperate as well. And I don't want it to be left to desperation
Mhm.
that you finally move your cat onto, you know, a raw food diet.
Yeah. So what about, speaking of, all the dog foods, one thing that I've actually had people tell me is, you can feed your cat this food too, about a dog food. And while I've never had to really dive deep into that conversation because at the time my cat I did feed him cat freeze dried because I knew what he liked, and I fed him Quest and Feline Naturals. He loved those two brands.
Yeah.
But thinking about the difference between cats and dogs, I believe that dogs are facultative carnivores. We know that cats are obligate carnivores. A lot of the dog food that is in the stores is kind of formulated on a barf type model. It's not really, so there's going to be carbs and stuff in there, and cats don't need that. So how do you respond to someone who is like, well, I'm just going to feed my cat the food that I'm feeding my dogs?
Well, it's all tricky because the thing that I don't wanna do is ever make someone feel bad about what they're feeding their pet or really pick a fight. So, you and yes, cats should not eat dog food, even if it's a nice raw dog food, because it it's not going to kill them, but it's not going to give them the nutrients they need, and it's going to have extra ingredients that they just can't utilize. And I think one of the difficulties there is that there are so many dog brands that branched out to cat, and it's essentially the same recipe.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the back of the bags, there's maybe a tweak here or there, but really at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to generally is whatever premix they put in there, the vitamin pack that they're putting in to ensure it meets, the requirements that regulators expect. So that's the first hurdle is, I am a purely cat food company. Everything we make is formulated for cats with a focus on, using a prey model diet. So when we're manufacturing food, it always starts with whole animals. We add in the offal, and then there is a minimal supplement mix that is based essentially on that specific formula we're making. So if you look at the back of our bags, we don't have the same ingredient panel over and over and over again. But a lot of the foods out there, they do have fruits, veggies,
Yeah.
sometimes some other unusual things that, you know, do not assist the cat in any way. On top of that, you're really looking for something. There's just certain vitamins and minerals that cats cannot produce on their own that dogs can. Because you're right, they're just not. I mean, if you look at a cat, if you look at its digestive tract, even that is so much shorter, excuse me, than a dog's is, even if it's the same size animal, because
Mhm.
they are made to just process meat and absorb all the nutrients from that. So it's it's really again, always, I'm going to keep saying it, a matter of educating and how much people are interested in. And once they have a better understanding of the animal they're working with, it's a lot easier to get them to see, oh, all right, I get how this all works together. Um, because otherwise, formulating for a dog and cat, is it possible? Yes. Is it ideal? No. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. But if you're looking for like the primo for cats, yeah, you want something specifically made for cats that is meat heavy and doesn't have a lot of extra ingredients in it.
I saw on your website how much care you put into sourcing the meats that go into your foods. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Someone's growling now. You're fine. Um So back when I first started making cat food, I've been a vegetarian and a vegan and gone through all those, waves that people do. Um, but one of my focuses when I started making cat food was I really wanted to make a product that was thoughtful towards the environment and towards all the animals we were using to make our meals. So I was using really high quality products, which I am still using. Like, I have grown at the with these farms. So we have had a very, very long history, which is amazing and wonderful. But to me, it's really essential, and I think it makes all the difference in the quality of the product that you're getting. You know, it's interesting because uh, most of us use software to first formulate, right? Because that gives us a good base, and that formulation is coming from the USDA. So the USDA has done all these tests on different cuts of meat and has figured out what nutrients are in it. And you plug it into your little calculator and it's like, bingo, here's what you're going to get. What's interesting is that I can formulate, but then when I use my ingredients and send it out for testing, all of those nutrient profiles are actually higher. Like, it is just a better, option if you're really trying to access everything that it can offer. So, yes, our sourcing is very, very important to me. It's important to me how the animals are treated, how they're housed. And so as we continued our journey, I learned about Global Animal Partnership, or GAP for short. And they're a third party, and they essentially audit these farms. And they look at how the animals are handled, raised, and it's a continuous process. It's not they pop in one day, everything looks good, and that's the end of it. They are a constant. And so we applied to be part of the GAP certification program, which essentially we were able to pair with specific farms and pick what ingredients we were going to use in our food. And that's pretty much what we are held to. So we have a level that is just consistent across the board. There's no substituting one ingredient for another ingredient. And I think it's just been really, it makes me feel good. We have a lot of vegan and vegetarian customers. They're happy with that because it is a little bit extra effort. It is a little bit more costly. But at the end of the day, I think integrity is everything.
Mhm.
So if I can have a product that has integrity and transparency, I've done the best I can. So right now we're actually the only GAP certified raw food that's available, which is also, I think, fairly remarkable.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, I know. It's like my labor of love. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? I'm in too deep.
So, what's it like being a vegetarian vegan who is also dealing in meat for a living?
Well, I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian any longer.
Okay.
Was. At the time, it was fine because it was like the cat food, It's like it's interesting because I used to make my dog his food, and I still cannot eat sweet potatoes because it's dog food in my brain. You know what I mean? I would cut it up and put it through the grinder, and no, no, thank you. It took a while for me to get back on kale as well because after a certain amount of making dog food with kale and sweet potatoes, it was like, oh, geez. Yeah, but at the time, I've always had a lot of respect for animals. My uncle used to be a taxidermist, actually, and so I would go to his studio in Flagstaff and help him with the elk hunts. So people would bring in these, huge animals, and we'd have to skin them and prep them, and then it was also a butcher shop. So it was like the whole shebang, and I just gained a lot of respect for the animals, but also for the people because it was not wasteful. They were really utilizing everything. So I don't know. I think that whole side of my family, we're all just kind of weird animal lovers, but also in a strange way. So
Well,
I
yeah, I think that's a good point
yeah.
because it's something I have always struggled with. I don't think that doing vegetarian vegan is right for me, but I try to be really mindful about like going to local farms where I can go and see the animals and they will willingly give you a tour so you can see how things are raised and handled and treated and like I try to be really intentional about that. And Kimberly knows I'm not the one that's going to be plucking the duck for the drinks or whatever you were doing last weekend, but
I know.
I have
right,
some
your ducks. I forgot about
respect
that.
for
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
I
Well,
guess
I've done the same thing because I get a box every 6 weeks. I actually updated it today that basically gets all the meat from farms around the country. And it's one of those things where it's, they're very particular about the farms that they get the meat from. And when I was researching the boxes, like the various, boxes that are out there, that was why I went with this one because of the thought that they put into it. And what's astounding is the flavor.
oh,
Everything tastes so much better. I love sea scallops. I think they are just the most delicious thing on the planet. I can't eat them from the store anymore because they taste off to me. But
right.
when I get them from my box and I have a bag in the freezer, I'm going to eat them this weekend. I will eat way too many because they are just so delicious. I usually eat them, and I actually send Billy Hookman from Green Juju. I'll send him a message saying, I'm eating sea scallops in truffle butter and stuff. And he's like, ooh, it's like so good. But yes, I did. I butchered a duck this weekend. That was
Mm-hmm.
the first time I butchered a duck that had everything. And I wasn't sure what to do. I was afraid to Google it because I didn't know what was going to come through my feed. And so I figured, you know what? I've done this with ducks without the feathers, so it can't be that much different. It was tough getting through the feathers. I will say that. That part was tough. But
Physically or mentally tough?
it was actually physically tough. I felt, my knives are sharp, but I had one knife was like, it's not sharp enough. And I didn't want to do the whole like meat cleaver chopping because I'm in the kitchen and I didn't want feathers going everywhere. And Johan was out of town, and so that was the only reason why I was doing it, because I think if he had been in town, he would have been like, "What are you doing?" Because he has issues with, I mean, he doesn't have issues with me feeding raw, but he has issues with the reality of it. Like, he doesn't mind the ground raw, but when there's a face on the counter, he's
Right.
just like, "Yeah, I can't do this." And so there was a face on the counter, but I actually, I just broke it up and fed the entire duck without the intestines through my grinder. And that's what my dogs are eating this week.
Wow.
Whole duck.
Yeah.
And it's the first time that they've actually had, I think the thing that sucks about it is I do use software to formulate my meals. And the software doesn't have things like fur and feathers to let you know how that's adding. So I had already formulated. I had some duck that I was already ground from the co-op, and I had already formulated everything and mixed up the duck, put them into containers, and put them in the freezer. When I was just like, oh crap, I have a whole duck I need to do, and so pull everything back out and put it in the fridge, let the duck thaw overnight, and then the next morning, it was after church. Just got it done. I wasn't happy about it. It wasn't as sad, I guess, as I thought it was going to be, because I kept telling myself, because this was like my friend's she raises ducks and quail, and the duck had been attacked by an eagle. So the eagle didn't get him, but the duck didn't survive. And she didn't want to throw her duck in the garbage, and she didn't want to bury her duck. She was like, I would love for your dogs to eat my duck. And I would have loved to say no, but it was my friend. And so I did it. And every time I was tempted to just go, I don't really want to do this anymore, I just remember, I can't look at my friend in the face and tell her that I threw her duck in the garbage so my dogs are eating her duck.
That's hardcore.
I know. I feel hardcore. I feel kind of happy about it because I hope that it's not a regular thing, but I know that if one of because a lot of my friends raise animals. So if any of them contact me and say, hey, the quail was much easier because they were smaller and you just put them straight through the grinder. But if they contact me and say, hey, here you go, I can say, yes, I can do that. And one more thing. It was actually kind of cool, the nerdy part of my brain, to see all the organs in the right place and being able to identify. I knew what the different organs were. And it was like, oh, I know what that is. So that felt really cool too. That's all.
Yeah. That's how it is when people around you raise animals. My neighbor has cows, steers. And so we get meat from her every year, which is amazing. Like you said, when it's raised properly and outside and grazing, it's just wonderful. But last year she called me and was like, I forgot they were coming today. Do you want these organs before they throw them out? And I'm literally running, eh, down her driveway with buckets,
Yes.
like hearts and spleens, and oh, can I have the tongue? And it was just
Yes.
like, who, who, who am I? Yeah.
I totally relate to that. I have friends who they'll tell me where, one of my friends, Dave, I saw him the other day. And he was like, hey, we're going to be, coming up on, slaughter season again. And I was just like, I would like, the tongue, the lungs. The tongue is hard to get around here because people understand how tender the meat is. What's also interesting is like whenever I meet someone that raises animals, I ask them what they do with the organs. And there was one family where they basically use the entire animal. Like they use the different organs, they have recipes for them that they cook them. And then whatever they don't eat goes to dogs. And I was just like, wow. I mean, like, wow, just so impressed. But a lot of people, like, so one person was telling me, oh, I got so many bones, so I buried them. And I'm like, bone broth, bone broth, bone broth. It's like, give me the bones. And so now I have a freezer full of bones.
So one of the topics that has been like a hot button issue, particularly this year, is the avian flu.
Oh, yes.
And, I definitely know we saw some headlines about cats. Like, is that something that you worry about? Is that something you test for? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when it first happened, I think we were all a little frantic because it was scary, and as things started to unfold, it kind of also felt a little bit like a raw food witch hunt once
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Um, Personally, and this is for you, Heidi, because eventually you'll listen. She says it's the hill I'm gonna die on, and she's not wrong. I still, after everything I've read, everyone I've talked to, I mean, I've talked to USDA, FDA, I've talked to the farms, I've talked to poultry specialists, I've talked to virologists. There is still not a strong enough connection between raw food and a cat getting sick with the avian flu. So yeah, at this point, for me personally, I definitely think that there needs to be a little bit more research and more evidence as to how this is, it is so contagious. We know that. But the possibility of one cat picking it up somewhere and then passing it along to the other cats in the household, that's a high probability. And for me, that seems a lot higher than ingesting the meat of a potentially contaminated animal and then, you know, catching that animal's virus.
Mhm.
So, I'm I'm glad the bird flu's kind of toned down now that it's summer. We
Yeah.
were testing at first. We tested for about 6 months. And then one day the lab called and said, the FDA is just making this impossible. Like we can't we can do the initial test, but so many tests come back presumptive and we're no longer allowed to really dive into it and understand, okay, is it actually positive? If it is, what strain is it? And without that information, you don't have much to go off of.
Right.
We did eventually stop testing. The farms we work with are still testing. They're still testing live birds. So that's really great. And again, I have such a good relationship with them that, if a single bird is sick, they have to destroy all of them, unfortunately, and shut down the entire farm. So they're really handling it, I don't know, strictly. I'm
Mhm.
not sure this is the best case scenario because if you're a healthy bird carrying a virus, that's really going to be a great opportunity for other birds to build up immunity
Community.
towards it, which is something that I think, there's just so many ways that we handle things that don't make a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we are not in control. So we have to just work with what we've got. But the bird flu definitely impacted cat food. There are still people who are quite nervous to feed a raw food diet to their cats. And a lot of those cats, are paying the price for it because if they've been on raw food for years and now they're having to process this entirely different type of food, that's really not beneficial to the way their body functions. It comes out in a variety of ways. Usually digestive is the first, way it shows up. So yeah, bird flu. Give it for sure.
So let's talk about the parts department.
Mm.
You sent me some yummy, cool things for my dogs, and I mean, I'm a huge fan of feeding different parts of things to my dogs. All my meals, they're not as fancy as a lot of people who post them theirs on Instagram,
Oh,
but I try. I try to get some really
my
cool.
local pet store carries these. I just made a
Yes,
connection.
yeah. I mean, it's like so kind of cool. I mean, I was going through the website and seeing just all the different things that you can do, and I was just wondering what was your inspiration to do that?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I think I was we were making food, and I was just recalling, years ago, trying to make food for my cats. And chicken, easy. And then I'd get turkey, and it was like, I can't get turkey hearts. Sometimes I could get turkey liver. And then I was thinking about ducks. So the whole thing started with me thinking, oh, you know what? This would be so great for DIY feeders, people who are
Mhm.
making their own food and can't sort parts and maybe just need a couple pounds, because you can't buy 2 pounds of duck liver anywhere, really, as far as I found. Um, so it started that way, really small, just kind of hearts, liver, gizzards. And then I honestly wasn't even using them. They were making them and we were selling them. And I was like, cool, that's nice. Good for those people who have this opportunity I didn't have. And then I don't even remember what it was. I think it was the green lip mussels. I was like, oh, these would be great to add into our food. So I was like, we should package those and sell them. And it just sort of snowballed. I think at this moment, because we have 5 new SKUs coming out, I think we're at 23 parts. Um, my house is bonkers now. Like there are probably 5 or 6 parts open at a time. If I, for some reason, have to feed the animals patties and sliders, I'm like, I'm a terrible parent. Get this boring bowl, like, you know. So, which is not true. I don't want anyone to feel bad about that. But the parts are just such a great opportunity. And again, because I can't seem to get away from this piece, it's all about education. So initially it was DIY feeders, and then it turned into I can add this to my pet's bowls. And now for me, it's kind of turned into if you feed kibble, can you add something fresh to your bowl? Is there
Yeah.
something in our line that you feel comfortable using? Yes, it might feel icky at first and be a little scary. And I know there's a lot of things to choose from, so it might be overwhelming. But if you can pick some hearts or some green lip mussels and just add a little bit of freshness to your dog's bowl or
Mhm.
cat's bowl, the cats, it's a little bit harder with the cats because there's a lot of those things are a little large for them. Um, But I just think it gets people into the right mindset, and then
Yeah.
when you start adding things to a bowl and you get more comfortable with it, it's like learning to cook almost. It's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I can do all these things. I can make this, fun for me." The dogs love it. It's so gratifying. I think probably all 3 of us like to play the game of what are you gonna eat first, right? 'Cause
Oh,
it's
I love that.
all have their one thing that's
Yep.
their favorite on the plate. So I'm trying to kind of branch out and teach people how to build a bowl with the parts, how to just add it to kibble or canned food. Or my new thing is kind of leaning towards, toys that you can stuff.
Mhm.
So if I've been stuffing West Paw topples, and what I usually do is I'll use some of the ground meat that we have because we have a ground goat and a ground venison. And then I add in maybe some hearts or some, what am I thinking? Gizzards. It depends on the dog. Green lip mussels, stick a neck in there or a foot or a sardine, stick it in the freezer. And then when it's dinner time, my dog has his entire meal and it takes him quite some time to get through it. But the piece that's so important with dogs and with cats that we tend to forget about is their jaws. Their jaws are built to chew and chew and chew.
And crush.
And
Yeah.
yeah, crush. Yeah, absolutely. And what we don't realize, or you know, I maybe some people do, but when they're chewing, it releases stress, anxiety, and actually good, hormones are released into their body. So it's beneficial on multiple levels. It tires them out, it's mental stimulation. And I just think it's a phenomenal option, to really
We
give
just
them.
talked about that, Kimberly. We just
Yep.
talked about there's a study that came out talking about the benefits of chewing, like scientifically proven benefits of chewing.
Yeah, it's really important. And our cat food is it's quite soft. You don't necessarily need to chew it. And that's something also with raw feeding. I love raw feeding, but I think because we have to do it on such a scale, it really needs to be, consumer friendly and kind of easier to manufacture. And you
Yeah.
can't just have a line of people cutting up meat into chunks and then portioning them out that way. So this is a nice way to keep their jaws activated, get their teeth clean. Um, and yeah, I actually love the parts department. I think it's so fun. It's just a matter again of getting people to understand how it works. So we with the new items that are coming out next month, we have some Oregon blends and then some ground quail and a 2-pack of quail. We added a QR code onto every label. So now you can scan the QR code and punch in the item, and it will trigger other items that pair well with that and give you
Oh,
kind
nice.
of a broad idea of, hey, these are the nutritional benefits if you were to
Mhm.
put all 3 or 4 of these together. Yeah.
I've been buying your stuff and didn't even realize it was yours.
We'll send you some, especially some of the new stuff so you can try it
Yeah.
out.
It is. It's kind of cool. I mean, I know we have a new dog here, Buffy. She's 7 months old, and she's my first dog that saves all the like the duck necks, duck feet, all of that. She saves it to last, and sometimes she'll even take it out of her dish and she'll finish her food, and then she goes back and she finishes her chew. And it's the funniest thing because I noticed it probably a week ago, and I've been watching her every day, and it's like consistently this is how she eats it.
They are all their own people, aren't they? One of them, they have their own everything. So, yeah. So that's our parts, and then I think the only item that I also did want to mention, just because I think it's useful for cat people, is, we have our bone-in meals that were our original 4 blends, and then we came out with a boneless option, which initially was just to help with kidney function, so it's lower in phosphorus. But as we formulated it specifically for adult cats.
Mm.
Because what a lot of people don't realize is when you manufacture something for an all life stages, you're really feeding the neediest possible animal. So all life stages means you need to make sure that 8-week-old kitten is getting all the nutrients they need. Well, an
Mhm.
8-week-old kitten needs more protein, more phosphorus, more calcium, more of almost everything than an adult cat does. So all those extra nutrients just have to be filtered through their organs.
Mhm.
So when we manufactured or formulated for the boneless line, which uses an eggshell powder instead of bone, it really allowed us to focus in on adult cats and what their needs were. So that line's actually done really, really well. And that was sort of triggered by a lot of our customers, who have been with me for 10 plus years. And they're like, my cat's finally getting old. Like, these are finally starting to taper out, which is absolutely completely normal if you're an 18-year-old cat, you
Yeah.
know. So, yeah, that line's been pretty helpful. I like it. I like that one a lot.
So, how much do you have to pay attention to stuff that goes on with AAFCO? Do you go to those AAFCO meetings? How much government regulation stuff goes into having a pet food company?
I think we had a lot more interaction with regulatory people when we were smaller. When we were smaller, we worked directly with the Department of Food and Agriculture. And that was actually really great because I learned a lot. They're very hands-on. And as we grew and got into a USDA facility, it is a completely different wheelhouse there because there's a USDA inspector there every single day. So there are regulatory things I need to follow and participate in, but it's a bit more hands-off now, which I appreciate. Most of the AAFCO stuff I hear through the grapevine through people who that's where their energy goes. My energy is really going towards making really great cat food. And that's not to say I don't care about regulations because I absolutely do and we follow all of them. but I just kind of, wait to hear what the next new restriction or allowance is from AAFCO, because it's always changing.
What about pushback from veterinarians? Do you ever run into any issues with that?
I absolutely do. Yeah. Um, I I do have some veterinarians who are really supportive of a raw food diet, but a lot of them are not. And, you know, the American Vet Association is not big on educating about nutritional needs of cats and dogs, and if you look at the way the whole system is set up, it's not a whole body approach. And I think that's where it's really kind of lacking is here's our problem. It must be this specific thing.
Like we're all compartmentalized or something, and
Absolutely.
nothing impacts anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about, even humans and animals, all of us, it is all interconnected. I had a friend who had awful issues with her knee, and it ended up being that she had lupus, which it took years for them to determine that because they were constantly focused on the knee. How do we fix this knee? And it's like, no, there's something internal going on. So with veterinarians, my stance has been I I I'm here to educate people, and I'm not interested in forcing you to believe the things that I believe, even if it's factual. It's not worth my energy or my time, and it's not being combative is not going to get anyone anywhere. So, I appreciate the vets who are open and understanding, and I really wish that, veterinary medicine in general was more open and broad. Like, you can't be an acupuncturist without being a vet first, but why? I don't these things I'm just, are constantly baffling to me. So, um, it's yeah, I do the best I can with all of that. And I'm sure you guys do too, but, I was telling Kimberly, so I think we talked the day after I had to take my dog to the vet. And it was I don't go to the vet often, but he had scratched his eye, and it was like, "I can't. This is out of my wheelhouse."
Yeah.
But, oh my god, I was like, "I have to step outside." I was just doing backflips. It was all these animals, and it's like, "Take this prescription diet, and here's their 18 prescriptions, and just give them this and this and this and this," and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh,
And they're all overweight.
their poor bodies."
Yeah, I'm in a lot of pit bull groups on Facebook, and some of them are just people post funny things about their pit bulls, and I'm just like, every single one of these dogs is overweight, and then like half of them are getting knee surgery all the time, and the other half of them have horrible skin issues, and I'm just like, oh, like, don't say anything because this is not the place. This is just for funny pit bull pictures.
I know. That's why I can't participate in that anymore because it's too much. So, I start with where I am and my core group of people and just hopefully, it branches out from there. But it's funny because the other day, I have this really lovely neighbor, the one who raises all the cattle, and she sent me this text message because she has barn cats. And when I was moving out of one of my facilities, I just had way too much food. We made this recipe that was great, but uh, the cats who liked that didn't like the original it was just a mess. Anyways, I had tons of cat food. So I was like, "Do you want some of this cat food to put in one of your 86 freezers?" And she was like, "Yes." So her barn cats are eating raw food, right? And her dogs are eating kibble. And the other day she texted me and was like, "Oh my God, I just read that kibble's terrible for dogs. Please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me it's not true." And I said, it actually really is true. And she was like, "Well, how am I meant to afford this?" And this is the piece that we always end up coming back to, right? Is
Mhm.
how do I afford raw food? But also I need them to be these are working dogs. So she needs them to be on their game and be healthy. So that piece is also kind of a struggle, right? Like raw food at the end of the day, is it more expensive than feeding your dog kibble? Yes, it is. Is it more expensive than eating canned food? Well, I don't know. It's a tricky conversation because you have to kind of break down how many calories they're getting per ounce, and right? It's not apples to apples. It's really apples to oranges. Um, but the desire to have something that's accessible to everyone
Mhm.
is so, yeah, it would be great. It'd be wonderful if there was a way to get, raw food into the hands of everybody and not have yet another hurdle, you know? I mostly, when I talk to people about raw food, it's either it's gross or I can't afford that.
Mm.
Um, the gross one's easier to
Yeah.
work through a bit. The I can't afford it, it's a fair and legitimate thing to say.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. That's a question for you guys, is how do we get through that one?
Yeah. It is. It honestly is. And I looked at it as, one something that someone said to me years ago about meeting people where they are. And instead of expecting people to jump from kibble to raw overnight. And I mean, I think many people have had that experience in the beginning where it's like, I'm going to do this, ran to the grocery store, bought a bunch of ingredients, fed their dogs, and everyone had blowout diarrhea the next day.
Yeah.
And then when I look back at that recipe, it's like there's no way it was balanced. It had 100 million different ingredients. It cost, $200-$300, and it was basically a couple of meals. And it's like that is not feasible. And then when I first started really looking into raw, I was just like, there's no way I can afford this. So I started slow.
Mhm.
And I fed raw in the morning and kibble in the evening because that's what I could afford. And then as I was going through that and going through the kibble and it was time to buy another bag of kibble, I was like, I think I can adjust my lifestyle to make this full time. And I did. But, less than a year later, it's like, yeah, this is way too expensive. And that pushed me into learning how to make it myself. But then again, buying all the meat from the grocery store can be expensive. But that was when I discovered raw food co-ops. And I remember someone told me about one. I took a woman to coffee who feeds raw. And she's like the hardcore raw feeder where if there's, what is it called? Roadkill. She's out there picking it up and, throwing it in the yard for the dogs. And I was just like, that's raw feeding. And I wasn't ready for that. But she told me about the raw food co-op. And I called my friend who lives in Florida and was just like, did you know that there's raw food co-ops? And she's like, what? And then we went on a rabbit hole to find all of them. And the one that we have here is amazing. And so they were able to help me initially cut my budget by 50% and over the years by even more, simply because as I learned what to feed and what I could, and also going back to the parts department, when I started going to feeding parts instead of getting the just ground mixes, it cut down the cost. And then, once you start going down that path, you just start finding more and more ways to save money. And I have like Dr. Harvey's, I have it on a recurring order with Amazon, so I get money off of that. And recently they actually reached out to me and said, hey, can we send you something free from there? And I was like, yes, base mix, please. Thank you. And they sent me a 3-pound bag. I asked for a 6-pound bag, but they sent me a 3-pound bag, and I was very grateful for it. But you learn. But it's really hard to tell someone that it's not like that. Usually people will tell you, well, you'll save money by not going to the vet. It's like, that's not a legitimate reason if you are struggling financially and now you're being asked to spend. Because I met someone the other day, a couple days ago, who spends $200 a month feeding one dog a raw food diet. And I was just like, yeah, I probably spend for each of my dogs maybe $65 a month. And
Mhm.
that's with food and supplements and treats, I should say on average over the year. So it's just sort of like, figuring out where to go and how to get the different foods, knowing where all the different, the ethnic markets, the outlet markets, that just connecting with people. I will, when I meet someone who raises their animals, I rudely ask, what do you do with the organs? And if they just don't do anything with them, I mean, I will buy them. I would love for them to get them for free. Everyone loves free, but I'm more than happy to buy them. I think the thing that sucks, though, is I've noticed that a lot of people are starting to realize that there is this new market out there. And so I've seen people selling organs for $6 a pound. And I'm just like, yeah, no, good luck with that business model. But it can be very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, putting something fresh in the bowl. And honestly, if it's a dog, it doesn't even always have to be meat, you know?
Oh.
Or even a cat. My cat, the dogs get lick pads and the cat's like, "What about me?" 'Cause she's just a dog on her, So my partner was like, "Can I give her cottage cheese?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So she just smeared a bunch of cottage cheese on the lick mat, and there you have it, 5 dogs and a cat just like and, yeah, there's a variety of things, eggs, dairy products.
Sardines, bone broth.
Mhm.
I mean, there's this, and I think that that's the other thing is that we overthink it. I did in the
Totally.
beginning. You just overthink everything. And also, social media is the quickest and easiest way to learn about these things, but it can be also very overwhelming and demoralizing as well.
Absolutely. It's
Because
a
it's
good
like
way
you
to make
think
you feel bad
yeah,
about
you
what
think
you're
you're
doing.
doing things so great, and then someone goes, "Oh, da 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 da," and now you feel like just an idiot because you thought you were really on the right track, and so I've had to learn to taper. There's a lot of things that people will leave comments or I'll see, and I just don't respond because it's like I don't want to be that person that discourages someone.
Mhm.
And it's like they're not killing their dog. What they're doing isn't, wrong. I just think that there's a better way, but they didn't ask. So keep on
Well,
scrolling.
actually,
I
don't be that guy.
know. I know.
Oh, goodness.
That's me.
Oh my gosh. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much for your time. This has been great.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was very fun.
All right. Until next time, everybody.
Bye, guys.